Hello, and thanks for stopping by. Eels, especially jellied eels, are a traditional delicacy closely associated with London, the recipe having originally developed over 200 years ago in the city's East End as a cheap meal for the poor. You can still dine on eels today, both jellied and stewed, in any one of London's pie and mash shops. Personally, and no doubt to most people, controversially, I've always thought they're rather tasty, although if you're not keen on the idea, then the pie and mash itself is always a sound option. One eel dish that's been lost to time though is eel pie. Even as long ago as 1895, a writer named Charles Ross lamented its demise when he recalled that, as a schoolboy, he often bought a pie at one of those cheap eel pie shops which once used to abound, but now seem to be dying away. The eel in the extreme interior was well enough, but the pastry a puzzle, the disposal of which required care and cunning. Another reminder of this archaic fare is the fact that one of London's most unique areas is named in its honour, Eel Pie Island, a slip of land which lies on the Thames between Twickenham and the area of Richmond known as Ham. Home to around 120 people, Eel Pie Island is the largest inhabited island on the Thames. There are no roads for cars on it though, and the only access is via boat or this footbridge, the latter option having only been available since the 1950s. What Eel Pie Island lacks in accessibility though, it more than makes up for in history and character, and in this video I'd like to share its remarkable story with you. Today also happens to be a rather special occasion, as I'm filming during one of only 2 open house weekends held each year, when, for a short time, the public are invited to explore parts of the island which are usually private, namely the vibrant collection of galleries and art studios. So, as we make our way around, expect to see some truly unique sights. Technically, Eel Pie Island is an ayot, the term for a long, narrow island found in a river, and although it's now home to a secluded community, it was, for many years, a popular leisure destination which groups of Londoners would head to for a relaxing day out. The Riviera of the Thames, if you will. One of the first representations of the island can be seen on this map dating from 1635, on which the cartographer Moses Glover noted, "This hath been a bowling alley." It's possible Henry VIII may have played bowls here, for it said he was fond of the island, Hampton Court not being too far away, and it's also believed he was a fan of the area's eel pies. Twickenham was indeed noted for its fresh eels. Its wider borough's coat of arms depicts a swan clutching one in its beak. By the early 18th century, Eel Pie Island was already a well-established destination. To accommodate the many visitors, a tavern called The Ship opened on a spot roughly in the middle of the island in 1737, which came to be adjoined by an eel pie house, the forerunner to today's pie and mash shops. Originally, Eel Pie Island was known as Twickenham Ayot, but as I'm sure you've already guessed, it was the celebrated pies sold and consumed here that led to its more affectionate title. As one journalist noted in August 1830, Twickenham Ayot is better known to its Cockney visitors under the name of Eel Pie Island. A few years later, Charles Dickens mentioned Eel Pie Island in his 1839 novel Nicholas Nickleby. Miss Morlena Kenwigs had received an invitation to repair next day per steamer from Westminster Bridge onto the Eel Pie Island at Twickenham, there to make merry and to dance in the open air to the music of a locomotive band. Throughout the 19th and early 20th century, the ship, which later became known as the White Cross and then the Eel Pie Island Hotel, was rebuilt and enlarged. In 1898, one such addition included a large ballroom, an important aspect which we'll return to later. In 1860, Twickenham Rowing Club established themselves on Eel Pie Island, where they remain to this day. And over the years, a number of boat yards have also sprung up. One such yard, which opened in 1892, was that of the Thames Electric and Steam Launch Company, which, as the name suggests, pioneered electrically powered vessels. Another company of note once associated with Eel Pie Island was Daimler, whose founders, Frederick Sims and Gottfried Daimler, started out testing their petrol engines on boats before making the switch to cars. In the year 1899, the entire island was sold on no less than 2 separate occasions. The first transaction occurred in January, when a local brewery snapped it up at auction for £4,700, about $532,000 in today's money, which is an absolute bargain. You wouldn't get much in Twickenham for that nowadays, although I imagine the price was relatively low, as in the days before the Thames flood barrier, parts of the island often found themselves underwater. The brewery only held onto the island for 8 months. It was sold again in August 1899, this time for £7,352 to an Ealing resident named Edwin Stevens. Edwin maintained and enlarged the island's hotel and subdivided parts of the land into private plots, laying the groundwork for the residential housing that exists on Eel Pie Island today. One early resident, shown here in 1914, was a woman named Mrs. Lawrence, who proudly pitched a tent on her plot, a trailblazer for the bohemian spirit that would later come to define Eel Pie Island. In 1912, a film company, called the Phoenix Film and Picture Company, was set up on Eel Pie Island too, using a converted boathouse as their studio. Phoenix became known for their comedies, featuring characters such as Lieutenant Pimple and the duo Lemon and Dash, which were especially popular with troops during the Great War, although by 1919 the studio had closed down. Speaking of World War I, there was a major raid on Eel Pie Island in August 1916, when police sailed over to track down men believed to be avoiding military service. It would have been a tempting place to hide, I guess. In all, 40 arrests were made. Edwin Stevens, who had purchased the island in the late 1890s, passed away in 1942, and his death, along with the impact of 2 world wars, saw a decline in Eel Pie Island's fortunes as visitor numbers began to dwindle. Things began to look up in the 1950s though, when the Eel Pie Island Hotel was bought by an antiques dealer named Michael Snapper. It was Michael Snapper who oversaw construction of the island's first bridge in 1957, and in the early days it cost 2pence to cross, a toll collected by 2 elderly women who, by all accounts, could be rather formidable. While the bridge made the old ferry service redundant, a passenger ferry still operates today just east of Eel Pie Island. Run by the family firm Hammertons since 1908, it continues to provide a useful link between Ham and Twickenham, and very friendly to services too. I highly recommend it. By the time Michael Snapper took over the hotel, its former grandeur had long faded. He had ambitious plans to revive it, including creating a casino and roller skating rink, but these were swiftly rejected by the council, and as it transpired, salvation would come in a different guise. In 1956, a fellow named Arthur Chisnall persuaded Snapper to let him begin hosting traditional jazz concerts at the hotel's ballroom on weekends, something Chisnall was no stranger to, having organised similar events during his army service in the Second World War. Branded as one word, Eelpiland, spelt E-L-P-I-L-A-N-D, the first jazz night took place on the 20th of April 1956, and was an event which young people, who by now were becoming known as teenagers, flocked to dance on the ballroom's famously bouncy sprung floor. The Eel Pie Island Jazz Club was an immediate success, and over the following years, numerous greats played here, including Acker Bilk, Terry Lightsfoot, and Ken Collier, who stated, "Eel Pie Island is as close to New Orleans in England. The atmosphere and the feel is here. I have never experienced it so strongly anywhere else." One young man drawn towards the jazz scene was the inventor Trevor Baylis, who loved Eel Pie Island so much he made it his home for the rest of his life, thus becoming one of its most famous residents. Although he invented many gadgets to help those with physical disabilities, Trevor's most famous creation was the wind-up radio, which in the 1990s helped revolutionise communication in rural African communities. Trevor Baylis passed away in March 2018, but just a month before his death, his last public appearance was to conduct the grand opening of the Eel Pie Island Museum. The Eel Pie Island Museum, located on the mainland on Richmond Road, is easily one of the friendliest in London. I was even offered a cup of tea whilst I was there. It's staffed by passionate volunteers and features engaging displays on the area's boat building and musical heritage, plus of course a special corner devoted to the life and work of Trevor Baylis. If you're in the area, be sure to pay them a visit. In early 1963, audience numbers at the Eel Pie Island Jazz Nights began to dip noticeably. The reason soon became clear. Over in nearby Richmond, at the Station Hotel, a new venue, the Crawdaddy Club, had just opened. It was there that a fresh new act calling themselves the Rolling Stones were starting to make waves. Eager to play Eel Pie Island as well, Brian Jones reached out to Arthur Chisnell, prompting the launch of a rhythm and blues night at the club, initially on Wednesdays, to accommodate the band's sound. The Rolling Stones played their first gig on the island on the 24th of April 1963, and held a residency there for the next 5 months, during which time they became a major draw, with queues stretching all the way across the bridge. The Rolling Stones paved the way for a whole new wave of acts at the hotel, including the Yardbirds, Manfred Mann, Screaming Lord Sutch, Cream, Jimmy Cliff, and David Bowie, way back when he was with the Manish Boys and still known as David Jones. In the 1960s, the Eel Pie Island Hotel was documented at least twice on film. First in the 1966 Italian comedy Fumo di Londra, in which a man infatuated with the British upper classes somehow manages to stumble onto the island, and then in 1967's factual documentary Look at Life. In 1967, the hotel's license was revoked, resulting in its sudden closure. It was briefly reopened in 1968, during which Joe Cocker, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and The Who played here, and then rebranded in 1969 with a name more in line with the zeitgeist of the time, Colonel Barefoot's Rock Garden. During this period, prog rock and heavy rock were a thing, seeing gigs by Pink Floyd, Hawkwind, Genesis, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple. Colonel Barefoot's was short-lived though, and once the concert stopped, a group of anarchists moved in to squat at the hotel. By 1970, Eel Pie Island was believed to harbour the largest hippie commune in Britain. Life in the commune was far from idyllic. Rubbish collection was halted, and the electricity was cut off, leading the bohemian residents to begin ripping out the hotel's wooden fittings for firewood. Then in 1971, the Eel Pie Island Hotel was wiped out for good in a large blaze. The site is now covered by a property development called Aquarius, a name which was no doubt chosen as a nod to the previous hippie residents, although there's no squatting allowed here nowadays. Although there's no longer a pub on Eel Pie Island, there are still two historical, and very lovely ones, standing close by. The White Swan, opposite the north-eastern end of the island, which dates from 1690, and closer to Eel Pie Island's bridge, the Barmy Arms, which dates from the 1700s. Close by, on Twickenham's Church Street, there's also the Eel Pie Tavern. The 1990s were a tough time for Eel Pie Island. In November 1996, a devastating blaze tore through the island, destroying many of the boathouses and artist studios that had come to define its character, leaving livelihoods in ashes. Yet despite this setback, the Eel Pie Island community rallied. Rebuilding from the ruins, they restored the island's spirit, and today it's as strong and as colourful as ever. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at the history of Eel Pie Island, and as always, I'd love to hear your own thoughts. Have you managed to attend an open day there yourself? And if you could see any of the many acts who played at the hotel, which would it be? Please be sure to let me know in the comments. If you haven't yet subscribed to Robslondon, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course, it'd be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip, via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well, and please be sure to stay tuned.